The finale of The Bad Batch really happened in episode 15. So in this episode, Kamino Lost, it was really more of an epilogue. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it was an alright send-off to season 1, and there's a lot to talk about. So let's dive into The Bad Batch episode 16, the final story of season 1. Spoilers ahead. Before talking about the final episode, I need to cover how we got here. The Bad Batch is a very unique show, and it took a strange path to say the least. It's kind of weird that the entire first season of The Bad Batch was mostly watching bounty hunters chase Omega for the Kaminoans, only for the Kaminoans to all get killed and captured at the end, never even getting close to Omega or doing any plan to save themselves. It totally makes sense and it's all realistic, but it's just a really odd storytelling choice for the show. Fennec, Cad Bane, and even Crosshair all spent so much time chasing Omega, and we spent so much time with Sid. But then in the end, none of it really amounted to anything, and the show just kind of suddenly went back to its Imperial focus from the first episode. Not that that's all bad. I personally prefer the focus on the Empire, and I think that the show should have focused more on it all along. The transition from Republic to Empire was way more powerful and interesting than any of the bounty hunter chase scenes could ever be. It's just really peculiar that we spent so much time on Sid, bounty hunting, and meandering around the galaxy, with the only real payoff being Omega's slow character growth. You could watch the beginning of the show, and then just jump straight to the end with a few minor additions, and it would function the same as a complete series that makes sense. They escape Kamino, they return to Kamino, and then the Empire comes in.
And they blow you up. Boom!
How rude.
It's almost like they wanted to tell a darker story about the Empire, but they felt pressured to make it more like The Mandalorian, and they ended up with two parallel stories shoved together. One about the Republic becoming the Empire, and the other about the Bad Batch bouncing from mission to mission fighting bounty hunters. It's a really interesting choice that doesn't tie itself together very well in the end, but that doesn't mean it was a total failure. Both stories were pretty good, and with the show being confirmed for a second season, there's a lot more they can do to continue the different arcs and tie it all together later. That's kind of like what the Clone Wars did with its weird chronology and developing a lot more depth over time, so anything is possible. But time to talk about the last episode in particular. Kamino is destroyed, everything is sinking, and the Bad Batch need to escape with AZ and Crosshair. Solid enough ending with a mixed execution. Lots of good and bad, but that's pretty much par for the course at this point. I want to preface my thoughts by saying that I have a lot of critiques, as usual, because this is a review and animated Star Wars isn't always a masterpiece. But that doesn't mean that the show, its first season, or the finale was bad. Stick with me for now and don't worry if I'm a bit negative. I'll go over my thoughts on the show overall and its legacy more later in the video. But there are some details in the story of this final episode that I just need to discuss before I get there. Crosshair was a jerk to everyone almost all the time, even more than usual. In the previous episode, he was offering them a chance to join him. He wanted to reunite, and he was having serious philosophical discussions with them. He even helped them as a team when they needed it. But in this one, well, for the beginning of the finale, he spent most of his time just insulting and harassing the Bad Batch members and slowing them down out of pure spite. Even when their lives were all in danger and Omega helped free him, he barely did anything and he stayed pretty much mean to everyone most of the time. One detail that annoyed me early on, probably too nitpicking but just strong enough that I have to mention it, was when they stopped in the cracking underwater tunnel to have a long conversation about how unsafe it is that it's cracking. Like, yeah, it's unsafe and cracking, but it's your best option, so you better run through the tunnel before it breaks, and not waste all this time standing around just talking about how dangerous it is. I'll admit it was super cool to see a new sea creature on Kamino though. You can only imagine what kind of crazy fish must be lurking in the planet-wide ocean, so it's a really good thing that we got to see a bit of that before leaving Kamino for good. And AZ's death was a really powerful moment because I liked the character a lot and it was a dramatic sacrifice to save Omega. But it was immediately undercut by so many things, not to mention one of them being that he doesn't actually die and he gets saved. My first thought when he started drowning was, couldn't AZ just lock his hands holding onto the pod as he powers down, so that his body is pulled to the surface with Omega and they can just recharge him later? And my second thought was, oh my god Omega, why are you doing this? Do not waste the droid's sacrifice by attempting to swim out into the depths of the dangerous ocean. She could be killed by drowning, a sea creature, or the sheer pressure of the water, and even if she gets to the droid without power, there's nothing she can do but hold on and sink with him. It was an incredibly stupid decision that pretty much ruined AZ's death scene and loses a lot of respect for Omega. Decision in the heat of the moment? Yes. Fitting with Omega's incredible care for others? Yes. Practical, even in theory, even just a little bit? Not even close. Crosshair targeting Hunter then to stop him from going after Omega seemed harsh, but honestly understandable given the insane impossibility of these characters' rescue attempts and how completely reckless they seem to act. But no, Crosshair wasn't aiming for Hunter, he was aiming for AZ. What? I get that he's a modified clone and he has improved eyesight and all that, but even in the context of Star Wars, I find it unbelievable that he could possibly see AZ and Omega down there, especially to the level of accuracy that he would need to make that shot. Unless, of course, it was just some desperate last move, shooting randomly into the water and hoping it would be close enough to Omega that she could grab it. That seems to fit with his character, and I guess that will be my own headcanon explanation for it, because there's basically no way he could actually make that shot on purpose, at least in my opinion. And then at the end we get that emotional moment of him deciding to stay, alone, with no Empire or Rebel connections, on a small metal island, in the middle of the ocean, with no food or drinking water, where no one will look for him. Huh? Is Crosshair okay? What's his plan here? I'm sure Season 2 will magically have him back in the Empire as a random ship spotted him there soon after or something, but geez, I'm just struck by how bad all the Bad Batch members are at decision-making in this episode. Seriously, what is Crosshair's plan here?
How did Jack get off the island?
Well, I'll tell you. He waded out into the shallows, and he waited there 3 days and 3 nights, till all manner of sea creatures came acclimated to his presence. Then on the 4th morning, he roped himself a couple of sea turtles, lashed them together, and made a raft.
He roped a couple of sea turtles.
Aye, sea turtles.
Well, that brings us to the end of the Bad Batch's Season 1 finale. Was it all good? No. Was it all bad? Also no. Overall, the show was actually pretty good. It brought a lot of interesting characters, events, and ideas to the table, and the Bad Batch has had a lasting impact on Star Wars that makes it worth watching between the Clone Wars and Rebels. Is it as good as the Clone Wars and Rebels? I don't think so. But I still look forward to seeing Season 2 with cautious optimism. The Bad Batch hasn't been the Star Wars show we need, but it's been slowly covering some good things between all the filler, so I think it's worth watching and worth talking about. I just wish that it had been able to actually focus more on the transition from Republic to Empire throughout the show. That was always its strongest point. People watch the show to see the clones deal with the transition. I doubt many people watch the show mostly just to see the petty crime lords and bounty hunters of Ord Mantell face off every filler episode. But now that the show is done with a bang and a hesitant trailing off, I think we can see what they were going for in the big picture. It seems to me that the Bad Batch was really hurt by its TV show format. Let me explain. Consider that there are 16 episodes, each one about 30 minutes long, except for the first one, which is 75 minutes. If we turn all these episodes into movies, it works so much better. I think that binge watching the episodes might help with this now when they're all released, but to give you an idea, here's what they'd look like as movies. The first movie would be about 2 hours long, and it would include the Bad Batch episodes 1 through 3. It would show the Republic becoming the Empire, the Bad Batch escaping to get help, and then end on the dramatic cliffhanger of Crosshair brutally leading his new Imperial elite squad. A dark, solid, suspenseful cinematic film. The second movie would also be about 2 hours, covering episodes 4 through 7. This movie would show the Bad Batch being hunted by bounty hunters, going to Sid for help, and working with her while Omega grows as a character. It would have a lot of the fan service moments like Jabba's Rancor and the Martez sisters, with a fun and lighter tone as it focuses on the characters and the galaxy they escaped into. This second movie would then end with the arrival of Captain Rex, Wrecker's chip making him attack Omega, and then the Bad Batch getting their chips removed. It would tie all of the Sid and bounty hunter stuff together nicely and make the episode with Rex a dramatic climax to Omega's growth rather than just another random episode where not a lot happens. The third movie in this new style would be about 2.5 hours, covering episodes 8 through 12. This third movie would bring back Crosshair as a bigger threat than ever, resolve all the bounty hunter stuff, and end with the Bad Batch saving Ryloth as a big cinematic final battle. Then the fourth and final movie to close it off would be another 2 hours, covering episodes 13 through the end of the show. This last movie would start with Sid losing her home, making it less of a weak conclusion to the story of Sid and more like strong foreshadowing for how the Bad Batch would lose their home at the end of the movie. After helping Sid recover her place on Ord Mantell, the Bad Batch would go to rescue Gregor, Hunter would be captured, and then they all go to Kamino. And we get that huge explosive ending immediately followed by the slower, more thoughtful epilogue we just saw. The problem with watching The Bad Batch week to week as it comes out is that the overall story can get easily lost. Watching them as movies like this might help more for people binging the show later, and I'm sure that Season 2 and beyond will help tie things together and give the overall story a big boost. So, I guess, to summarize, The Bad Batch isn't a great show, but it still has time and it still has potential. I discounted the Clone Wars and Rebels when they first came out too, so a weak start for Star Wars animation is nothing new. I suspect that in the end, The Bad Batch will be as beloved and celebrated as the other shows. But until then, this was my deep dive into Season 1. Now that The Bad Batch's first season is over, I won't have these weekly reviews to make anymore. So let me know in the comments what you thought of the show and what other videos you'd like to see on my channel going forward. And as always, thanks for watching.